Guys, welcome back to the channel, doing another serial killer files reaction, and we are going to be reacting to Ted Bundy, the lady killer, Ted Bundy. I'm one of those guys who don't understand when there are people who say that Ted Bundy is attractive, even after the fact, after all of this stuff. It's like, but acts, I think, can poison or taint someone's looks, regardless of what they look like. I've heard a lot of women talk about how attractive Ted Bundy is. I would have fell for him if he had came to me, and I'm like, why? I don't know. Some of the things that people say sometimes annoy me, I guess, and I call out things like that sometimes. So I do apologize if I've offended anybody, but I don't understand it myself. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and watch Ted Bundy on the serial killer files. So if you like this type of content and you want us to continue to do content like this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the content. We really appreciate it. Helps us out a lot. Check out our Patreon page. Our Patreon page has a lot of exclusive content, early access stuff. Go on over there, support it. You can watch the Gacy tapes with me, and maybe we'll do the Ted Bundy tapes too. So
good looking, charming, intelligent, well educated. Many people with these traits go on to make a positive name for themselves. However, one man took this concept in a different direction. Ted Bundy exploited his good looks and charm to his advantages, taking the lives of young women and girls who were too trusting and too vulnerable. And his path of terror made him one of the most memorable serial killers of all time.
It's fucked
Let's
up, yeah.
open the serial killer file.
Ted Bundy, the lady killer, yep.
Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 23, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, to a single unwed mother named Eleanor Louise Cowell and a father whose identity was not known. To avoid the stigma of being born out of wedlock, his grandparents Samuel and Eleanor raised him in Philadelphia to believe initially they were his parents, and his mother was his sister, though he eventually discovered the truth. In 1950, his mother moved with Ted to Tacoma, Washington, and in 1951 met and married Johnny Bundy, who adopted Ted and had 4 children with Louise. Ted was known to have idolized his grandfather, a cruel, racist man who physically abused his wife and daughters. He resented his mother for having never told him about his biological father and disliked his stepfather, despite his efforts to make Ted feel included. Ted began showing signs of unsettling behavior at a young age, an incident described by his Aunt Julia as her awakening from a nap to 3-year-old Ted standing and smiling by her bedside, having placed knives around her as she slept. As he grew into adolescence, he took to stealing, breaking and entering, and peeping through windows. During high school, he was arrested on suspicion of burglary and auto theft, but records of this were expunged at age 18.
Normally this would consider you a creep.
After graduating high school in 1965, Ted enrolled in the University of Puget Sound before transferring to the University of Washington in 1966 to study Chinese. During his time there, he began dating a fellow student known as Stephanie Brooks and eventually dropped out. But his relationship with Stephanie would not last, as she ended their involvement that year. This was a turning point in Ted's life. In his devastation, he traveled to various states and briefly attended Temple University before returning to Washington in 1969. In 1970, he met Elizabeth Klopfer, a divorce secretary at the University of Washington School of Medicine, whom he began a turbulent relationship with and dated multiple women without her knowledge. He re-enrolled as a psychology major at the University of Washington, graduating in 1972. In 1971, he worked at Seattle's Suicide Crisis Hotline alongside Seattle police officer and future crime writer Ann Rule, who would become one of his biographers later in life.
Ooh, wow.
After graduation, Ted became involved in politics and managed to get accepted by 2 law schools, and in 1973 secretly renewed his relationship with Stephanie Brooks while still in a
Okay.
relationship with Elizabeth. Life
What the
seemed
heck?
to be looking up for Ted. He was talking marriage with Stephanie and introduced her as his fiancée to his bosses. But in January of 1974, he broke off his relationship with Stephanie in what is believed to have been an act of revenge for their previous breakup. By April, he had dropped out of law
What?
school. It was at this point that women began to disappear. Ted Bundy's first attempted murder was that of 18-year-old University of Washington student Joni Lenz. He broke into her basement apartment around midnight on January 4th, 1974, bludgeoning and sexually assaulting her with a metal rod from her own bed. She survived the ordeal, but not without permanent injuries. Multiple women began disappearing within a month of each other. On February 1st, 21-year-old University of Washington student Linda Ann Healy had disappeared from her home in the early hours of the morning. On March 12th, 19-year-old student Donna Gail Manson, a rebellious girl known to take off without
Manson, wow.
notice, disappeared on her way to a jazz concert on the Evergreen State College campus and was not reported missing for several days. April 17th, 19-year-old Susan Elaine
These are
Rancourt
some
disappeared from
really...
Central Washington State College on her way to view a German film with a friend. May 6th, 22-year-old Roberta Kathleen Parks disappeared from Oregon State University while on
These
her
are
way to have
lovely young
coffee
women,
with
too.
friends. Later that
Just
month,
got fooled.
22-year-old
That
Brenda Ball
sucks.
disappeared after leaving the Flame Tavern in Berlin, Washington, last seen with a brown-haired man whose arm was in a sling.
You see, I always tell my friends, my female friends, and I don't even tell my female friends anymore, just my female friends. I even tell my buddies, too. If you don't know them, don't go with them. Simple as that. If you don't know them, don't go with them. Be smart. Trust me, even if they are charming, even if they are women or a guy, it doesn't matter. Because there are some sick women out there too. There are some sick women out there who will take advantage of guys and who will. There are women who rape guys. Believe it or not, they are real. They're out there. So, just if you don't know them, don't go with them. Simple as that. And if someone buys you a drink, don't trust it. I genuinely mean that. People are sick. You don't know which one could be a psycho. For all I know, there could be a psycho living in the house behind me, and I'm just not aware of it. You just got to be careful. You got to be severely careful. And Ted Bundy and Gacy and all of them should have taught us that. Really, just don't be don't be trustworthy when it comes to strangers. Don't be trustworthy because you know what? I've never picked up a hitchhiker, and I never will.
The ruse of the injured man would become a Bundy signature, exploiting the kindness of these women to make them more vulnerable to him. All 6 women's remains were found on Taylor Mountain near Issaquah, Washington, over a year later.
Wow.
Police became concerned but were unable to find any evidence to connect the disappearances other than their appearances. Pretty, young, college-aged women with long, middle-parted hair. After the June 10th disappearance of 18-year-old University of Washington student George Ann Hawkins, police scoured the alleyway between her boyfriend's dormitory and her sorority house looking for evidence, but found nothing. Witnesses reported a man using crutches with a leg cast near the dormitory struggling to carry a briefcase to his car, a light brown Volkswagen Beetle. The final 2 victims of the Northeast area were 23-year-old Janice Ott and 18-year-old Denise Nasland, both of whom disappeared separately from Lake Sammamish State Park on July 14, 1974. The 2 missing women and George Ann Hawkins' remains were found 3 months
That's what
later,
I think of that guy.
2 miles from the park. Police in King County got a detailed description of the suspect from various witnesses, and upon seeing the composite sketch, friends, co-workers from the Department of Emergency Services where Ted worked, and even his girlfriend Elizabeth, all recognized and reported him to the police. However, police doubted that the charming, well-mannered law student could have been the killer, and he was overlooked as a...
So basically, they were just stupid. because he's charming and he's good looking, it possibly can't be him. He would never do something like that. Because, do you know the one thing about Dracula, vampires in general? As much as I love vampires that are ugly and are hideous and monstrous, I gotta say the ones that are easily the most effective are the good looking guys who are the vampires, because they can lure people in without any hypnotic abilities. They can lure people in with their charming looks. The fact, I feel like there are some, and I might not word this the best way, so you got to forgive me, but there are probably more psychos that are good looking out there than ugly, or an equal amount on each side, for different reasons too. So that annoys me. The fact that he was good looking, he's charming. There ain't no way that this guy could be responsible. He's a very nice guy. You don't know him. But yet everybody, even his own girlfriend, said that's the guy in that picture.
Suspect. In the fall of 1974,
Crazy.
Ted moved to Salt Lake City, Utah to attend the University of Utah Law School, but found himself unable to keep up with his fellow students, feeling inferior to their intelligence. Women began disappearing once again. On October 2nd, 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox disappeared. 2 weeks later, on October 18th, 17-year-old Melissa Ann Smith disappeared after leaving a pizza parlor. Her remains found 9 days later. She was found to have remained alive for up to a week after disappearing. On Halloween,
Wow.
17-year-old Laura Ann Amy disappeared after leaving a cafe at midnight. Her naked body was found beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death on Thanksgiving. Elizabeth attempted to report Ted to the police 2 more times, once to the police in Washington and once to the police in Utah, but her reports were largely overlooked. On the afternoon of November 8th,
Because he was
Ted
charming and
approached
good-looking.
18-year-old Carol DeRonk at a
Annoying.
mall in Murray, Utah, posing as a police officer. He informed her that someone had tried to break into her car and she should accompany him back to the police station. When she realized Bundy was not heading towards the station, he attempted to handcuff her, but she managed to escape, flagging down another driver. Later that night, 17-year-old Deborah Kent disappeared after leaving a school theater production. Witnesses reported a man lingering near the auditorium that night, and the key that unlocked the handcuffs used on Carol was found in the parking lot. Her body has never been located. By 1975, Bundy had shifted his hunting ground to Colorado, making his way between both Colorado and Utah
Never found her body.
to find new victims. January 12th saw the disappearance of 23-year-old nurse Karen Campbell from a hallway at the Wildwood Inn. Her nude body was found a month later near the resort. She had been bludgeoned to death. On March 15th, 26-year-old ski instructor Julie Cunningham disappeared on her way to a dinner date. Bundy later confessed to beating, assaulting, and strangling her. On April 6th, 25-year-old Denise Oliverson disappeared while riding her bicycle near the Utah-Colorado border in Grand Junction. On May 6th, Ted traveled to Pocatello, Idaho, where he kidnapped, raped, and drowned 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver in a hotel room before disposing of her body in a river. On June 28th, Susan Curtis disappeared from Brigham Young University. The bodies of this group of victims were never found. Investigators in Washington were finally beginning to piece together evidence to track down their killer, compiling a database and finding Ted Bundy's name appear on several lists of potential suspects.
Those fucking people responsible for letting him slide as long as he did should be ashamed of themselves. I am dead serious. The fact, like, I'm going to say it again, the fact that he was, okay, good looking, nice, and charming all became reasons on why they just kept refusing to believe it was Ted Bundy. They are as equally responsible for the fact that he was going out and killing as many people as he was from the get-go. From the get-go, when they told him that this drawing is Ted Bundy, that's when they should have taken him in for questioning. They should not have just, nope, it's not him. Those people, that 12-year-old girl, probably would have been alive now. Well, probably, I don't know if they'd be in line now because it's been years, but like alive now. Well, yeah, they would have been alive now. But regardless, they would have been probably fine if if they had just said, okay, let's bring him in for questioning. They're saying it's him. Let's go ahead and do this. This is annoying to me. This is utterly annoying.
Causing him to rise to the top of their suspects. Bundy's first arrest occurred on August 16, 1975, when he failed to pull over for a routine traffic stop in Granger, Utah. The officer noted the front passenger seat was missing, and upon searching the car, found rope, ski masks, handcuffs, and other items that were initially thought to be used for burglary. Police later searched Bundy's apartment and found some evidence tying him to Karen Campbell and Deborah Kent, but nothing that could concretely link him, and he was released. Bundy attempted to destroy evidence by selling his Beetle to a teenager, but police confiscated it. Searches of the vehicle uncovered hair evidence matching samples from Karen Campbell, Melissa Smith, and Carol Durank. Carol and witnesses from the night Deborah Kent disappeared later picked Bundy out of a police lineup. Bundy was charged with aggravated kidnapping and attempted assault. His parents paid his $15,000 bail, and he went on to stand trial on February 23, 1976. The trial lasted 4 days, and he waived his right to a jury. He was found guilty of the kidnapping and assault and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison. In June, he was charged with the murder of Karen Campbell and was transferred to Aspen in January of 1977.
Finally, some shit's getting done.
But staying in prison was not something Ted was keen on. On June 7, 1977, after being transported to Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen for his preliminary hearing, he asked to visit the courthouse library as he chose to be his own attorney.
He tried to escape, didn't he?
He was excused from handcuffs and leg shackles, and Ted took advantage of this and escaped through a window.
Yep.
He hiked through the forest, breaking into cabins to survive. After 6 days on the run, he was caught after stealing a car and driving recklessly due to exhaustion and an ankle injury sustained from his escape.
Oh yeah, from jumping out that window?
Despite legal advisors and friends urging him to stay in jail and await the trial, he plotted his next escape. Ted seemed to focus on losing
he knows
weight,
he's
which
guilty.
didn't arouse much suspicion. But he was intelligent and calculating. Obtaining a floor plan of the jail, a hacksaw blade, and cash from visitors over 6 months, Ted cut a hole in the ceiling of his cell. After losing 35 pounds to fit through the hole, he made his final escape attempt on December 30th, while most of the jail staff were on Christmas break. After making his bed to appear as though he were asleep, he climbed through the crawl space above his cell, broke into the chief jailer's apartment, stole clothes, and walked out of the jail. He stole cars, hitchhiked, and took buses to Denver before flying to Chicago. His absence was not noticed until noon the next day.
That's crazy.
Ted eventually made his way to Tallahassee, Florida on January 8, 1978, renting a room at a boarding house near Florida State University under the name Chris Hagen. He attempted to live honestly, but found this impossible to do while trying to hide his identity at the same time. He took to stealing credit cards and shoplifting to survive. Soon, however, Ted's urges returned, and he went on a rampage. Less than a week after arriving in Tallahassee on January 15th,
once a killer, always a killer.
Ted broke into Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house in the early morning hours. He bludgeoned and strangled 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. He then brutally beat 20-year-old Lisa Levy, biting and sexually assaulting her with a hairspray bottle. He then attacked Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, breaking their jaws and beating them unconscious. The attack was said to have occurred in under 15 minutes. After leaving the house, Ted broke into the apartment of student Cheryl Thomas and attacked her, leaving her permanently deaf and ending her dance career. Chandler, Kleiner, and Thomas survived their ordeals. Levy and Bowman, however, were not as lucky and died soon after. Ted's last known victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who disappeared on her way to class at Lake City Junior High School on the morning of February 9, 1975. Her remains were found 7 weeks later, nearly 35 miles from her last known location. Ted was caught nearly a week later on February 15th near the Alabama state line after being pulled over in a stolen vehicle. He attempted to escape and assault the officer, but was eventually subdued and arrested. Bundy stood trial for the assaults and murders of the Chi Omega sorority girls in June of 1979 to national sensation. His public defender and one of the members of his defense team attempted to set up a plea bargain, agreeing
Seattle
that he
Mariner
would plead
shirt.
guilty to the murders of Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, and Kimberly Leach in exchange for 75 years. Prosecutors agreed, but Bundy backed out at the last minute, too proud to admit his guilt. This proved to be a fatal move, as eyewitness evidence placed him at the crime scene and odontologists matched bite marks found on Lisa Levy. The jury deliberated less than 7 hours before finding Ted Bundy guilty on July 24, 1979, of 2 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of burglary. Ted Bundy was sentenced to death.
Good.
The
Good
trial
riddance.
for the murder of Kimberly Leach took place 6 months later in Orlando. Clothing fibers matching Ted's jacket were found in a van he had stolen and on Kimberly's body, and eyewitness testimony putting him at the school with her on that day of her kidnapping. The jury found him guilty in less than 8 hours. During the
good.
sentencing
Less than 8
phase,
hours.
as he questioned former girlfriend Carol Ann Boone, who was testifying as a character witness, he proposed to her, and she accepted. Due to a Florida law that constitutes legal marriage when declared before a judge in court, they were legally declared married. She gave birth to their daughter in October of 1982. Bundy was sentenced to death for a 3rd time on February 10th, 1980.
3rd time being sentenced
Over
to
the
death.
next 9 years, he would confess to the murders of a total of 30 people, detailing how he killed and mutilated their bodies, admitting to acts
That's
of
like the only-
necrophilia, grooming.
To be like, well, let me live because I could tell you how I killed them and where their bodies are and stuff. That was like his only grasp to life at that point. Like he was just milking it the whole fucking time so he would stay alive. But there's no way he was getting out of prison. Even if the death penalty wasn't around at the time, there would be no way at this rate he was getting out of prison. So
the bodies and keeping body parts as trophies. After many stays of execution in exchange for confessions,
Yeah.
he was finally executed for Kimberly Leach's murder via electric chair on January 24th, 1989 at 7:16 a.m.
wow,
He was
almost 10 years.
42
Just
years old. That's
looks
all
horrible
for now.
right
Now
there.
be sure to check out another one of my videos by pressing
again, I don't understand it. To me, the guy was guilty. It was so obvious. If I was in charge of that police force or that's the police station at that time, I'd have been like, bring him in for questioning. Let's not even waste time. Get him in here. Let's try to see how his psyche is and all that stuff. Especially when everybody's saying, this is the guy who was killing people. This is the picture that you brought us. This is him. And they still, nope, it can't be him. That annoys the hell out of me that he got away with so much because of his looks. That annoys the fuck out of me. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Sorry if took it a little bit too personal there. I was just really annoyed by the fact that he got away with so much when it wasn't even necessary. He could have been dealt with earlier. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Curious to hear your guys' opinions. Again, if you like this type of content, you want some more content like this, me reacting to serial killer files, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for the new channel, share the content. Really means a lot. And support us on Patreon. That's also a really big help. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, keep it retro, and I'll check you guys out in the next video. Take care. Holy shit, Michael. We made it to We Slaughtered Barbecue. The epitome and the purpose of our trip is to make it to this area.
Oh yes. Food and cattle.
Yep. I just noticed, is that a cemetery way over there, or are those cattle?
No, I think that is a small cemetery.
Holy shit, that's kind of cool and creepy. That thing is massive, but there's not just that one. There are spiders literally
There's
everywhere.
one there. There's one there. There's one over there. And then there's this one here.
Dude, they're everywhere on the
Oh, they're all
property.
huge.
It's
Oh,
cool.
there's one there.